I noticed that it started before it actually showed on my screen last time. So
Yeah, I've got a note that says it's now streaming on YouTube.
okay. So hello, people out there in YouTube land. Yep, here we go. Here's the screen. Muted for me. Take it away, Rick.
Hello, welcome to another installment of the workshops.
Open the waiting room and let people in.
Oh yeah.
We have to let people in first.
That's true. That's true. Okay. All right. Floodgates.
79 people.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Like a miscommunication between the bouncer and the MC. Well, welcome everybody who's just joining from the fantastic keynote previously.
Yeah, we are just letting everybody into the room, and we'll be starting as soon as we've cleared the waiting room out.
There was a problem with the concession stand, and the popcorn machine was down for a little while, so people ran behind. Not our fault.
Okay, a couple more people. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll monitor the waiting room, and Rick, if you'd like to begin, we can get things going.
All right. Well, good afternoon or evening or morning, depending on what part of the world you're in. Welcome to another installment of NSA 2020 workshops, Modern Stereo Card Assembly Revisited. This will be performed by Tom Dory. And Tom's been taking 3D images for over 30 years, as well as collecting. His 3D shooting started with a realist in Revere 33, moving on to the medium format Sputnik and 3D World cameras. His current camera is the Fujifilm W3 or Canon 5D for Cha-Cha images. Tom is a past winner of the Tex Treadwell Award for Best of Show Stereoscopic Image. He's the past coordinator of the APEC 3 Modern Stereo Card Exchange Group. He twice was the NSA convention chairman when the convention was held in Mesa, Arizona. Tom now spends his time playing with his mobile phones and with stereoscopic displays and is still shooting with the W3. Tom, take it away.
Thank you, and hello to everybody. So happy to see so many people in the meeting. And let me just, I'm not sure if I'm presenting yet. Let me just say that everybody is lucky they're not in Phoenix, Arizona right now. It's going to be about 112 to 113 degrees today. So no time to have a convention except virtually. But I'm happy to see we have so many people from all around the world. Now I ask, is my screen visible before I get started?
No, you're not sharing yet, Tom.
So let me go down and share here.
And now, Tom, do you have any video or sound as part of your presentation?
I do not have a video, but I do have no audio either, just myself talking.
Okay, great. Then we should be all set. And
Are we
can
looking
see
now?
your presentation now. Yes, we can see it.
We see your screen now.
Yeah, I just forgot to click. Okay. Making modern stereo cards, I find a fascinating topic, and I'd like to go over just an outline today in the 30 minutes that we have. So there are some goals I'd want to talk about, the focus of how I like to do it, though not the only way, look compared to historical cards, and then do a workflow using Stereo PhotoMaker. I also use Adobe Photoshop, how to lay out the front and the back of the card and do some formatting. All right, and then just some options and design thoughts. And of course, APEC is the Amateur Photographic Exchange Club for 3D. It's the third installment of it. It's been going on for many years now. and how to join that if you're interested in participating. Okay, so how to create a modern stereo card. Well, I like to start with historical design, and found out very early on, as most collectors know, there's no one single historical card design. The card size varies, the color varies, the image size varies. Some cards has text on the back, some on the front. You know, Keystone and Underwood were two of the most popular ones. I'm showing one print, curved tops, no separation between images, and a nice detailed description on the back. So that's a nice starting point. But that's not the only one. There are many other images, card stock colors, from the tan to the yellowish gold. Image size here is 3 3/16 inches. Sorry, not metric. On the top, the bottom one is square, only 2 7/8 by 2 13/16 inches. The top one does have a small septum, the bottom one doesn't, and you can see blank. So where I'm going here is large images, small images. There's a tissue view you're seeing on the right-hand side that has probably the widest separation, about 5 millimeters. And again, to change units on you, on the left-hand side, each image is very tall, cabinet size, 3/16 by 4 1/16 inch. And advertising on the back. So where did that leave us? Well, you get an idea. You can do pretty much anything that you want. The only caveat I would say is if you want people to view it, you probably should make it so it fits in either a standard home style viewer or one of the handheld Lorettes or something easy to use for viewing. Okay, so modern stereo card size. I like to work with the 3.5 by 7 inch card. It's very convenient. It fits most of the historical size, called the home size. I use one print with 2 views, but I increase the separation just a little bit over some of the historical views. So about 1/8 of an inch or so seems to work best for me, but it depends on how you set your stereo window. A brief description under image is my preference, and something on the back with a little decoration. Should pick a neutral color cardstock as the historical ones did. So let's get into that, a workflow then. Make your 3D print. You can make it a full 3.5 by 7 with text and images and print it out to your home printer or take it to a printing place. And that's your card front. And so you just need to laminate it on the front. So you can do all the design in a photographic method. I prefer to create the card front and then add the image to it. So I can decorate the front in many different ways and have it on the paper, similar to the historical ones, right? If you decide to create the card front, Photoshop is a good one. In fact, that's the one I personally use most of the time, but I still always start with the Stereo Photo Maker software, and I'll show you the workflow for that. Adobe PowerPoint or Illustrator can be used for creating the layout. I'll show you some examples of the PowerPoint if you like. Illustrator is not that cheap, but it's a design layout software most people are familiar with. Now, the nice thing is that both Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator, you can now get a monthly subscription. And for just Photoshop, if you prefer that, and it's about $12 a month. And that's not too bad. You get adjustment layers. You can get color, contrast, sharpness. You can do more alignment. You can create a template. So many options. And as I show here, it's less than a week's at Starbucks. So it's really not that expensive. But let's go through a more common flow. Starting with the cardstock. I like to buy 4-ply ragboard, 100% cotton for longevity, so no acids in the board. You can get almost any color. You can purchase this at almost any craft store around the world. Museum quality is the one I say personally prefer. Most of the time in the United States, it comes into 32-inch by 40-inch size. And as I show here, you can cut it into 8 by 11-inch sections. And I'm just showing the first, second, third cut. And then, of course, that gives you the 8-inch, and then you cut to the 11th inch. Now, each of those 8 by 11 inch pieces will hold 3 stereo cards, 7.5 inches wide. So you get up to 36 cards for one of these and a little 7-inch by 32-inch strip left over to do something with. If you don't have a good cutter at home, some of the stores for a very small charge will cut this cardstock down to you. Now, why 8 by 11, not 8.5 by 11? Well, 8 by 11 fits on a 32-inch width, and I only need the final card to be 7.5 inches. So it does work out very well. And I'll show you the alignment in a minute. So how to cut the cardstock if you do it at home. I use a rototrim myself. It has 2 guide rails. It has a rotary, very sharp blade. It has a paper guide to hold the cardstock or paper in place. The Fiskars also has one. It's 1 rail guide. It works very well also, and it's much less expensive. Some people have this old wooden guillotine type cutter in. I'm saying don't use that. It doesn't cut 4-ply cardstock very cleanly. This type of one doesn't have a way to hold the paper in place like the rototrim does. So not preferable. You get ragged edges and it's just not a good look for your cardstock. Also with the rototrim, especially, you can cut as fine as human hair almost, 4-ply and certainly paper. So those are some examples here of if you do some minor trimming, you don't get it quite right the first time, you can go back and do some very exact cutting with this type of rotary blade. All right, so we've got cardstock. We've selected 4-ply 100% cotton rag archive, cut it into pieces, and now we're ready to actually do something with our image. So the best program, as I think everybody knows, it's free, even better, but it's an excellent program, is Stereo Photomaker. Version 6.03 is the most current one as of June of this year. The web address is shown there, but just type Stereo Photomaker into your browser and you'll come to this. With this software, you import images. I'm showing an example here where you can import 2 images, so a cha-cha method, but it also imports stereo images, either side-by-side JPEG or MPO images if you're still using the Fujifilm W3 or W1 camera. You import and align, so the alignment, I prefer to use the little button at the top, the auto alignment, and it gives you information after it does the auto alignment, and it works very well in most cases. There are some times where if you have not enough contrast, the alignment isn't perfect. And it gives you how much rotation, vertical and horizontal pixel change to do the alignment. And you get horizontal, vertical, and it also sets the stereo window. Now, that's critical. So how to adjust this? Well, in the edit at the top of the menu, select preferences under edit. And then there is a selection under adjustment. So 3 levels down, edit, preferences, adjustment. And you have the option here of mount near points to the window if the deviation is less than 1/25th of an image, which is the most preferred one, to have the image behind the stereo window. But there are several other options here you can have. You can correct barrel distortion. You can do auto crop if you like. I don't have it selected here, but you can sharpen afterwards. And so if you set this up in your preference, again, under edit, preference, and adjustment, it does set the stereo window for you when you do the auto alignment. And here's an example of what you can see of the auto alignment effect. It does an anaglyph. Oops, let me go up one, sorry. It does a anaglyph for you, so put on red blue glasses, you can actually see the adjustment. If you don't like what you get, there is a horizontal slider here to actually do fine tuning adjustments. If you just like to free view it, where the red and blue left and right images are on top of each other, that's at the front of the stereo image, a window on the card. There's also many other options here you can do. So it's an excellent program for doing alignment. Make your selection of where you want the alignment done, under Edit and Preferences. Now, always color adjustment. I don't know about you, but I always want to adjust or tweak the color a little bit. Under Adjust, this program has, under Color Adjustments, several different, very sophisticated levels of doing it. So levels, curves, different color adjustment, grayscale adjustment. You can do some histogram averaging. Let me show you one example. In this example, I've selected levels adjustment. And so you see left and right image, and you can sync these together, do independently if you didn't get your exposure exactly right in a cha-cha method, or if you have something issue with the shutter on your camera and a little bit exposure isn't quite accurate, you can do individual left and right. And record output. If you're not totally familiar with a histogram, you have a black slider here. If you move it up every channel, and there's 255 channels in an image of density, below that slider goes to black. So you increase the black. Same thing with the right side. If you pull it down, every channel above that will be pure white. And then in the middle, you get your grayscale change. And so easy adjustment. You can also use the bottom sliders at the top in the scale here. So excellent program. This is something sophisticated you usually only see in Adobe Photoshop. All right, so we've adjusted the image. We want to save it now. Many options for saving it. You can save it as a stereo image and it's an MPO file. You can save it as individual left and right images, which is what I do if I'm going to import into Adobe Photoshop for any final tweaking. The stereo image you can get side-by-side JPEG. And then you can get into printer setup, okay? So before we quite get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about viewing options. So as I mentioned at the start, you can either have no separation between the images, that's the septum, which many stereo views historically were like that. Or if you are like me, you prefer a little bit of separation between, it matches some of the other stereo images as well. So how to do this? In the current version, you go under View and then select Border. And in Border, there are outer border, middle border, and inner border. That refers to the border all the way around the image. So you can change colors and get floating windows here. You can get up to 3 different colors around your image. What I'm talking about for the septum is at the bottom here. It's the left and right space, and it's only print save available. And you select how many pixels, and you can select the color. I personally like to select the septum color to match the paper I'm going to use, so it sort of blends in, and you get the illusion of separate images, even though it will be one final print. I like about 4 millimeters, which is about 1/8 of an inch, and you select the color and just hit OK, and you're ready to print. This, I have to say, I've had some difficulty working for me every time. One of the reasons I go into Photoshop because I have more control, but there is an excellent help page. So at the bottom here, I have the link to the online border help page. Again, it's at stereojpn.org, English for me, and then along the line of text. All right, wow. So we have cut up cards, we've done some alignment, and now we want to do a print setup. So if you go to the print setup on the main menu, you have the option of print resolution. If you print it at home, the resolution is important to match your printer. You can set paper margins left and right, the paper margins here. You can see the color here I put in between because I'm going to trim this and mount this to a cardstock. So I wanted this color here. You have the option of putting titles on, image description on it, selecting fonts. It's a wonderful program for that. And then, of course, select the canvas size. Right now I have this set as 8.5 by 11, so I could print multiple prints on one piece of paper. But if I send this to an outside lab, I will save this as a 3.5, as a 5 by 7, because that's the size of paper they print on. If you save it at any other size, your image will be either compressed or stretched. if you try and print on a 5x7 at a photo lab. So it's important to get the paper size correctly, either in this program or in Adobe Photoshop. Not image size, paper size. Right. So we have our image. We're going to trim it down, of course. Let's look at the cardstock. As I mentioned, on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in the United States, you can fit 3 images on, 3 different cards, front and back. Of course, any color paper can be used. I prefer 100% rag to match my cardstock board. Print on an inkjet printer if you're doing this at home, not laser. LaserJet just puts little bits of dye particles on the surface. And if you store it, they peel off after a while. Inkjet actually gets into the paper a little bit. Layout can be done using Adobe Microsoft PowerPoint or Adobe Illustrator. I'll show some examples of the PowerPoint layout, which is much more accessible to many people. The key here is I do print trimming marks, alignment marks, and the advantage in both Photoshop and Illustrator is you can make front and back align perfectly. So when we put the front to the back with the cardstock in between, you get a perfect alignment if you do your alignment marks right. I also put a small alignment mark here for my images. Notice the septum I put in. And so it's easier to align the image on this piece of paper. Okay, adhesive. How are we going to glue the cardstock to the paper and then the image to the paper? Very popular is in APEC group is the Scotch positional adhesive. It used to be 3M. It looks like this. Comes in a long roll and has a brandishing tool on it. It's positionable, and so you can pull up and push down a little bit to some extent your paper or your image until you get it just right. And then with the paper on the bottom, which is sort of a wax paper, you put that on top and use your burnishing tool and make it permanent. Xyron laminator, find those on eBay. They're relatively cheap. They come in long cartridges, makes it very simple. You just roll it out. You have also positionable paper here. Makes that very nice to use. Both are very common and pretty easy to use and make a nice permanent bond. Now, I also have a hot press that I use from time to time. As you can see, it's pretty darn old. It's a Seal, that's a common brand. I bought it off of eBay probably 20 years ago, and it was 10 years old at the time. It still works just fine if I use a hot press type paper, which isn't quite as permanent, but it's another option to do. So alignment, here's the 4-ply cardstock. Here's alignment marks. And by the way, the cardstock is showing your 8 by 11 inches. The card paper back in black, the card paper front in blue sitting on top of it. You can see the alignment marks. The process flow is I will take the cardstock, the paper, and either the Scotch positional adhesive or the Xyron lamination process and align the front or to the cardstock. So align one side, line it up. As you can see, the paper is 8.5 by 11 because that prints easily. The cardstock is 8 by 11, but that's okay because the card is only 7.5. So you have plenty of room. That's just paper hanging over. It still aligns very well. I then burnish everything down on the front side, flip it over, use the alignment marks for the back side here, and laminate everything together. And so now we have the front and the back image of the cardstock aligned on our cardstock. And then, of course, it's just a matter of putting down the image. I'll show that in just a minute here. With the cards with square corners tend to get damaged. And so that's one of the reasons that historical cards sometimes went to rounding. For 4-ply cardstock, a heavy rounder corner like the Lasco is a very common one. It works wonderful. You can still buy them on eBay. The company's still in business. You can go to their website. They're a little bit expensive, but a reasonable investment to have. If you don't use 4-ply cardstock, and just want to cut 2-ply, for example, this type of corner rounder you can buy in almost any hobby shop, works very well also. I might mention, besides being 100% cotton rag for archival purposes, the 4-ply is about what historical cards were, many of them. And it just gives a good feel in your hand, a good look. That's what we're going for in this particular demonstration. All right, so here's my trimmed down image with the septum in between, printed the same color. So this was a lab image at a Photoshop laboratory, a 5x7 print, and I just trimmed it down, leaving the septum in between. I put the picture, and I usually use the Lasco system to put adhesive on the back. And then I just alignment with the alignment marks here. And of course that covers everything up and it looks great. Or at least you don't see them. So you position your image on the card using alignment marks, and then you make it a permanent attachment. All right, so that in almost my 30 minutes is have fun. You're free to make whatever you want, usually. The key part is getting the stereo window set correctly, which is a little more difficult in Photoshop, but SPM works very well to do that as well. If you're interested in building a collection of modern stereo cards, the Amateur Photographic Exchange Club, you get to keep it. It's not a portfolio. We exchange cards and you build up your collection. For more information on making them, the current distributor is Steve Hughes, or you can contact myself. Either one of us can help you get together with the rest of the group and start contributing. Now, before I go, we've got like a few seconds left. Just a few. I wanted to show you. This is PowerPoint. So how to do card layout in PowerPoint. That works very well also. You just put the alignment marks on PowerPoint and it also helps you line it up. Notice I have cut marks, trim marks in between. If you want to have a border, that's fine. Description or none. Images or not, pictures or not. And so this is how you can do it in a portrait mode. Put your description on. Again, my alignment marks I like to use. So Photoshop is very easy to use. I'm sorry, PowerPoint's very easy to use if you don't want to deal with Adobe Illustrator, but both work very, very well. And so that's what I have to discuss, and I think I'm about out of time, moderator.
I think we have time for a few quick Q&A. So I got this one from Lisa Ann Fanning, who says, "Is there a lab you recommend, or do you send out to local labs?"
I go to CVS Pharmacy Photo Lab. I used to go to Sam's Club, but they shut down their photo labs on site. You can still mail them in. So no specific one. I do ask what kind of printing machine they use, and the Fujifilm printer is a common one. It used to be a 960 model. That takes actually uses photographic paper rather than an ink print. So that would be the only key, is to find out how they're printing the images, but any good photo lab can do it.
Okay, if anybody has any other questions in the chat, if you want to type them, we probably have, well, we did start a little bit, so what, maybe like 2 minutes for Q&A, I'll say. Or if you have a question that you want to say, if you want to raise your hand, unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to get to too many of you. So if you go to the participants tab and you click on it, you can raise your hand in there. And there's a bunch of interesting information in the chat as well. So Tom is asking, is the PowerPoint available?
Yes, the PowerPoint I can put onto the convention website afterwards.
Okay, so we'll have links on that page. Yeah. Then Jay is asking, do you ever use a laser to cut the corners or masks?
A laser? No, I haven't used that. That's a very interesting idea. I wonder if it would burn the paper rather than giving a clean cut.
I guess we'll see in future virtual conventions. That'll be a silly question because everyone will have their own laser.
That's right.
How are you affixing photos to your card?
when I fix photos to the card, I usually, almost always, let me go to this page, use this Xyron laminator. I just put the photos in, and it's got a little crank and crank it through, and it puts a protective film on the top and applies the adhesive to the back with a peel off protective coating. Really simple to use and not very expensive to purchase.
Okay. Do you have a what type of paper do you use, and do you have a finished card you could show us?
Yes, to the answer. Let me get the card. This happens to be the, you can see this, yeah, there we go. This happens to be the current card in the APEC exchange that we're going to have a SIG meeting to talk about it. So as you can see, it's one image that I've trimmed it with a 5x7 print. I put the septum in between, aligned it on the card, and did rounded corners. So I didn't get a chance to talk in much detail, but all the pattern on the back I've just scanned in from historical cabinet cards or other stereo cards, import them into Adobe Illustrator because I use it, and made vector images out of them rather than pixel images, so I can scale them to any size that I need. And so that's what a modern card looks like made with this process. It's nice, feels good in your hand to hold it. It's flat. I haven't figured a good way to curve them yet. But that's what I have.
All right, and maybe over to JR. If you you lowered your hand again, Eric? Did you do anything with that, or is that just haunting the system?
No, that wasn't me.
Okay. Let's see, because he was first. We'll go with Rob now. Rob, if you want to, Rob Ellis. Okay, you should be unmuted now.
Hi, Tom. That's a great
Hi.
presentation. Very clear. I have a recommendation for a lab, and it's local for virtually anybody in the U.S. Walmart uses particular Fuji printers. Most Walmarts use a particular model of Fuji printer, and those Fuji print and the people at Walmart know very little about how to run them, but that's irrelevant because the Fuji printers have very gutsy blacks and rich saturated colors, and all you have to do is open a Walmart photo account, and of course you can send the files to them digitally, and then go an hour later to your local Walmart and pick it up.
Excellent suggestion, and I completely agree about the Fuji printers. It's real photographic paper rather than ink process. And some of the Walmarts actually, at least the Sam's Clubs I used to use, you could get the printer profile, and so match up your screen to what would actually be printed and get very accurate colors. But the Fuji machine is the preferred one at whatever store you go to.
Right.
One more, maybe we'll say, let's see. So we got a link in here. Let's, I'm going to unmute Valerie, who has a question.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Oh, Tom, I thought it was a wonderful presentation. I've used Stereo Photomaker. I've used it hundreds of times for my slides and to prepare them for other people and to donate it to them, but I never use the levels. So when you showed that, how you could change levels per slide, and then you could also check the button to link them together, that's really wonderful. So thank you for opening my eyes to new features in there, or features that were in there, but I just never used.
Well, thank you. I will not claim to be a Stereo Photomaker expert. I've been fiddling around with it for a while. It's a marvelous program. Can't believe that it's still free, but it's a really good support and critical for modern stereo printing.
All right, I think that's probably gonna be time. So let's give a round of applause for Tom.
Thank you all. Yay.
Thank you, Tom.
Appreciate it all. And Suzanne, I saw you were online. Ms. Hughes, I appreciate your calling in. You know how to do this as well as I do, but thanks. Okay, on to the next one.
Okay, so I'm gonna unmute Rick over there. I don't know if we're fighting with the buttons. Okay. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I'm still letting people in from the waiting room, and they keep coming.
Yep.
So you want to take a look at that. So thank you, Tom and Dory. That was an excellent presentation. And our next workshop is called Photoshop Layers for Easier Adjustments in Compositing. And it's being presented by David Kuntz. And David started in 3D photography with a stereo realist camera in 1978 and has been an active member of the LA 3D Club, formerly the Stereo Club of Southern California, since 1980. Today he shoots digital 3D with a variety of twin camera rigs. His work, which has won numerous awards in international competition, often involves digitally manipulated and computer-generated imagery. He's also an avid stereo card maker and participates in several of the Stereoscopic Society of America print folios. In addition, David is the NSA treasurer. Presenting David Kuntz.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. How's my volume level, guys?
Sound good.
Great. All righty. You know what? I want to start my timer so that I have some idea of if I'm going too long on this thing. Okay, and am I ready to screen share?
Please do.
Okay, I think this is even going to be the right screen.
Fantastic.
It is.
Looks good.
All righty. The topic for today is Photoshop layers for easier adjustments and composites. And I already hear many of you thinking, but I don't do composites and I probably never will. But layers can help you with adjusting your images anyway, for a variety of reasons. They allow you to do all your editing non-destructively and in a way you can go back and easily change and tweak. And I want to make it clear that I use layers and layer adjustments in particular on virtually every single image I do, whether it's a single layer, whether it's a family snapshot or whatever. I use it all the time. I do it because it saves me time and it gives me better results. And that's why I want to show it to you now. I think you'll all get some value out of it. So what are we going to cover specifically? We're going to see what a layer is. I'm going to talk about layer blend modes, layer adjustments, which is the key thing that I want you to be able to take away, layer masking, and I may even show you how I pull all that together, although I have a feeling I won't have the time. And I'm going to throw a lot at you in a very short time, so don't try to memorize it all. There are videos on YouTube that cover all this stuff in detail. The purpose of this tutorial is to really expose you to what layers can do, make you aware of what is available, and allow you to start exploring it for yourself. Okay, so let's start with what is a layer. And to examine that, the first thing I'm going to do is open up the layers palette in Photoshop, which I go to Windows and Layers, and hopefully the screens and things are updating fast enough so you can actually see all this. And hold on, I've got a bunch of videos in my way. I need to move those out of the way. Okay, so here's the layers palette over here on the right, and it shows me that I have 4 layers in this particular document. Hold on, I want to get rid of one more window of people talking. There we go. So I have 4 layers in this particular document, and the way they show up in the image is the same as the way they show up in this. They're stacked like a series of pieces of paper. So this red circle is on top, and then the green is below it, the blue is below that, and then there's a black layer that covers the entire canvas below that. And if I want to move things around, I can just grab it with the mouse and I can move it down, and there it goes. Now it's moved down a layer. And if I do that, it's moved down another layer. And if I do that, it appears to disappear, but it hasn't disappeared. It's simply gone behind this black layer, which I can click off. There's a little icon here that looks like a very tiny eye, but even if you can't tell it's an eye, when you click on it, it makes that layer invisible. And there's my red circle. It was there all the time. It was just hiding. And it's important to note one thing right at this point, and that is this checkerboard pattern is what Photoshop shows you when an area of your image is blank. It doesn't show you white as blank, because what happens if the background of your image is white? It doesn't show you black, the same thing. So the checkerboard means clear or empty. Turn that back on. I'm going to move that back up. Now, there's quite a number of things going on in this layers palette, as you can see. Right up at the top here, we have all sorts of controls. I have absolutely no idea what any of these do. I never use them. I'm sure they're incredibly useful. I've just never gotten around to using them myself. Here we have something that's key that I'm going to talk about. Oh, great. I was hoping that tooltip would show up. This is the layer blend mode. And when I drop it down, you can see there are quite a number of options. I'm going to come back to this. This is the opacity of a layer. And the easiest way to see what that does is just to start sliding it, and there, boom. There we go. Now it's partially transparent. Looks very reminiscent of one of Denis Pellerin's ghost images. And I'm sure that the Victorians were probably using this effect in Photoshop to make their images. And you can go all the way to 0 if you want. And then again, these are the layers themselves. And then down here, there's a series of buttons too. Some of these are very useful. This first one, if I click on it, opens up a dialog box that gives me all sorts of things I can do to a particular layer, although these are more useful when you're dealing with a shape layer like what I've got here. Drop shadow, you can see I've just added a drop shadow and make it a little bit larger and darker so it's more obvious. A stroke is what they call an outline. And you can see I've just added that black outline. And furthermore, I've got all sorts of controls here over the size, over the position, over the blend mode, the opacity of just that stroke. And there's many other options here. So I can do all sorts of things with these controls. I'm going to cancel out on those though now to get back to where we were. This next button here creates a layer mask. We're going to use that one later. I'm coming back to it. This creates a group of layers, which I use a lot in composites. And this one just creates a new empty layer. So if I click that, I can see I've got a new empty layer here, and I can tell it's empty because it's got the little checkerboard thing. But if I go in here and pick up a tool and draw a shape, there it is. And if I want to move it down, I can start doing that. And if I want to get rid of it, which I do right now, I can drag it down here into the last icon on the right, the trash. And boom, there it's gone. Now let's go back and look at the layer blend modes for real here. The easiest way to understand what that does is for me just to demonstrate it very simply. So I'm going to select all three of these layers, and I can tell they're selected because they've now turned, the backgrounds have turned blue. And to do that, I held down the Shift key while I clicked on all of them. And now I'm going to go to layer blend mode screen, and you can immediately see that it has affected a rather significant change on my image. What screen does is the equivalent of an in-camera multiple exposure, so that at any point in the image, the color and luminance value that appears is the sum of the color and luminance values of the individual layers or individual exposures, if you want to use that analogy. There are many, in that you can see here, red and green combined to make yellow in that kind of a scheme. You can see there's many others. I only really use a couple of them. Screen, lighten, sometimes I use soft light. I just learned about that for using that for colorizing images. I rarely use most of the rest of them. And then normal is the one where we started at the very beginning, where each layer is an opaque thing, like a stack of pieces of paper. Okay, next up is layer adjustments. This is really the key thing that I want to show people, because again, this is something you can use on absolutely every image you make. And in fact, it's what I do. So here's an average 3D photo. It's set up for cross-eye viewing. And I'm looking at it and thinking it's a little too dark. So normally to fix that, I'd use a curve adjustment. I'd go to Image, Adjustments, Curves, and I'd grab this and I'd lighten my image up. Okay, I want you to notice the shape of this curve here. You remember it started as a straight line and now it's this bowed shape. So we're going to come back to that. And now I'm looking at this image and I'm thinking, gee, The shadows are still a little dark. I'd like to lighten those up a slight bit more. Whoops, wrong thing, sorry. So I'm going to use a very, very useful command called shadow highlights. It's under adjustments, shadow highlights, and I'm going to use that to make the shadows a lot lighter. Now they're a lot lighter. The only hitch is now that I've done that, I look at this image and I think, gee, I lightened it up a little too much. Maybe I got a little excited about that curves adjustment at the beginning and I should have backed off. But normally, the only way I would have to fix that is to undo everything by either going to edit, step backward, or if I went to the history palette, I could do this and go back. So now I'm back where I started. I just lost all the work I did. And if I go into the curves to redo it, I don't pick up that curve that has the bow. I start right back where I started. I've lost everything. And let's say I had done a number of other adjustments before I got to that shadow highlights. Let's say I'd done a color balance and a sharpen and some other things. And I suddenly realized several adjustments in that I hadn't done a very good job on the first one. I'd have to undo those, do a better job on the first one, and then go back and redo all of those. That's a lot of work. And I probably wouldn't do it. It's just too much trouble. So is there a way of getting around that? And that's exactly what adjustment layers do. And I want to show you that right now. Okay, the very first thing I have to do before I can do a layer adjustment is I'm going to right mouse click on this in the layers palette, and I'm going to convert to smart object. I don't exactly know what a smart object is and what it does, but I can tell you that if you don't do what I just did, most of the rest of what I'm about to show you won't work. So convert it to a smart object. Now, if I want to go use a curve, guess what? It's grayed out. I can't even do it. In fact, there's only 3 things on this palette that aren't grayed, on this menu that aren't grayed out. Now, instead of going to image adjustments, I go to layer, new adjustment layer, and now I'm going to go to curves. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make my bowed curve like that. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, yeah, same thing. Oh, I need a shadow highlights adjustment. For some reason, this is one of the 3 that wasn't under layer adjustments. It's still under adjustments. And when I do it, you'll see that it is what's called a smart filter. It's down here. It's not on top of the thing like this is. Don't ask me why. That's the way Photoshop does it. So now I'm back where I started, where I realized, gee, I went crazy with that curve. I shouldn't have done it so much. But now, when I open up this curve, it's the curve right where I left off. And I can go back in now and tweak it to get it just where I want. And same thing, if I want to go and play with the shadow highlight, when I open it up, it's right where I left off. I can do whatever I want with it. And I can bounce back and forth several times if I need to get things just exactly where I want. So this is what I was trying to impress on you about getting better results. This ability to bounce around and quickly refine an adjustment rather than having to undo it and start from scratch really allows me to home in on an ideal adjustment very, very quickly. Furthermore, that little eye icon is applicable for these adjustment layers. If I click it off, I clicked off the visibility of the curve. It's no longer being applied to the image, but it's still there. I can click it right back on. I can click off the shadow highlights. Now I am right back to my original image as if I did nothing to it. Nothing has been done destructively to it. All this editing is being done non-destructively. I can click on the shadow highlights. I can click on the curves. And I can even do something like, I'm going to copy this by holding it and dragging it while I'm holding the Alt key. I've now made a second curve. Let's say I wanted to try this, but I didn't want to lose my previous adjustment. So now I've got that, and I can turn that on and turn back on my previous one. So I can try different things without having to go back and undo it if I decide, gee, I didn't do a very good job on that last adjustment. And I do that a lot of times, especially in composites. I might make a big change to an image, but do it to a copied set of layers so that I don't screw up what I had before in case I decide that everything I did wasn't so good. Now let's talk about this on a 3D image to see another feature about this that is rather useful. So by a 3D image, I mean that the left and the right are in separate layers here. You can see them over here, left and right. So same thing here. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, gee, this is a little dark in the shadows. So I'm going to go Image, Adjustment, Shadow Highlights. I'll lighten it up a bit. I'm going to do it a lot, maybe so you can kind of see it. And I'm looking at this image, and another thing I see, it may not be obvious to you viewers at home because of the color accuracy of the way these things go out, but this white area is has a rather pronounced magenta cast, and I want to fix that. So I'm going to go into Layers, New Adjustment Layer, Color Balance, and I'm going to click this Use Previous Layer to Create Clipping Mask button. That's critical because when I do that, the layer adjustment that I am producing right now will then only be applied to the layer immediately below it. You're going to see that when I put it into the palette. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to make this a little more green. Now, at least on my monitor, it's making that white much more neutral. And you can see this little arrow. This tells you that it's a clipping mask, that it's only applying it to the left. In fact, if I take it off, release clipping mask, maybe it's not easy to, oh, whoops, that's because it's the color balance, not the thing. It's hard to see that because it's a very subtle adjustment, but now it's applying it to everything. I'm going to create clipping mask. Actually, I could kind of see the shift there. But the thing I want to show you that's really, really useful here is that copy feature. So now I want to apply everything I did to the left to the right, and I don't want to have to redo it all from scratch. So again, I'm going to drag and drop while I'm holding the Alt key. I'm going to get that double-headed arrow, and it's going to copy it. And then I'm going to go create clipping masks, and now it only applies it to this one layer. And I'm going to do the same thing with the smart filter. I'm going to copy it. So boom, there I've now just copied all these adjustments so that they are the same. Ron just asked, why not do it all on a single one? You might, but if you were compositing this, or if you were doing some tricks that I'm going to show you later with using layer masks to window it, you might want to keep them separate. So just hang on to that thought, Ron. There is some method to the madness. I wouldn't do this if this image as it's cropped right now was the end result. I wouldn't separate them. You're right about that. The important thing, though, to note about this is when I copy them, they are not linked. So in other words, if I change this radically, it doesn't affect the other one. That one's still where I left off. So I'd either have to manually change it, or I'd have to go in and copy it right back over to the layer again. So they're not linked, they're separate. Okay, so now I want to talk about, that was really the heart of what I wanted to show you with those layer adjustments, even on a single layer image, but also on a multi-layer image. They're still easy to use because of the ability to copy. So now I want to talk about layer masking a little bit. And again, the easiest way to show that is just to do it. So let's take the selection tool, and I'm going to draw an elliptical selection. So I'm doing that right here. And hopefully you can see on your screen that I've now got an elliptical selection. And I'm going to go over to here, and I'm going to do make layer mask. And that's what it does. And you can see, because I've got the checkerboard here, that it has everything else that's outside of the mask has now disappeared. And to make that a little more obvious, I'm going to create another layer, and I'll fill it with a color. Oops. Just so you can see. So it makes it very easy to do that. That shows you that everything outside of the mask is clear. Or if I take the gradient tool, it's really obvious what's, oopsie. Now you can see that this is behind everything. And in fact, if I click this off, You can see it's covering the whole image. And once I've got something masked like this, I can move it around. I can size it. It's doing them together, you'll notice. I'm not going to accept that. And right between here, there's a little icon that is supposed to be a chain link. And if I click that off, then it allows me to do something extremely useful. I can now move my subject material without moving the mask, or I can go get the mask and move that without affecting my subject material. Furthermore, I can size these things and do all sorts of stuff. So if I wanted to change the relationship of her to this windowing, I could do something like this. So you can see, using this, I can very rapidly get something exactly the way I want. I want to step backwards and undo these last couple things that I just did here. And just like the layer adjustments, I can copy the layer mask. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy it over to here. And now it's in the wrong spot. I'm going to move it over. I hope I'm going to move it over. Am I? Yes. What am I doing? Nope. Sorry about that. I was on that. Let's try that one more time. Copy that. I'm going to click onto that. There we go. Now it's going to work. Super. Oh, I did change the size of this, darn it. Let me see if I can figure out how much. 130%. So I'm going to go in there and change her so that she matches that. And now I'm going to select both of these layers. And I'm going to align them. And now I'm going to show you some very useful stuff here. I can move her with respect to the mask without moving the mask. If I click on one of them, now I can set the relationship of that photo. Now I'm changing her relationship to the stereo window that's defined by that mask. Or if I felt like it for some reason, I wanted to move the mask instead of her, I could do the same thing. And the other thing I want to make it clear is that if I grab her and pull her right close here, you see, because of the mask, if I get rid of the mask for a moment, you see her image overlaps this other one, but using the mask allows me to bring them nice and close without having to have gone in and cropped anything, not cropped the actual image itself. And again, now I can do all sorts of things like setting her relationship to the window, so forth and so on. If I undo the links on both of them, I can move her around and I could size her, all that sort of stuff. So I have a tremendous amount of flexibility here. Now I could do a circular mask. I could do a rectangular mask with rounded corners. I can do vignetted masks in Stereo Photo Maker. But the problem with Stereo Photo Maker is it's very easy to do it in that, and it's a great feature, but it essentially puts it on the same layer as your artwork. And once you've done it, you cannot undo it at all. So you have to get it right the first time, and there's no windowing. You cannot subsequently window it or do anything like that. So this is very much more powerful, besides the fact that I could do absolutely any conceivable shape mask. And I can very easily go in and do all sorts of refinements. For instance, if I wanted to feather the edge of this mask to make it a vignette, let's make it a little more extreme so you can see it. I can do that. Now I've got them a little too close. And I could go and, of course, match that and do exactly the same adjustment or even copy it, you name it. So it's very, very powerful. And again, if I go in, remember, I can turn off every single thing I've done: the color balance, the smart filter, the layer mask. I have done nothing to my original images. They are all exactly there as they were. The only thing that I cannot undo is the sizing and position changing. I have to go manually in if I want to change the size of this image back to the way it was. I'd have to go back in here and change it back. But other than that, every single thing has been done non-destructively. And to me, that's the power of it, because this means, and when I save my image, I open it up subsequently, I come right back to where I was here. I haven't lost anything. My curves, all those things will be just as they were. And that's the secret of really being able to get your images exactly the way you want. Because often I adjust something and then I'm doing it on my monitor, and then I go look on my TV and I realize, oh, gee, I need to sharpen that, or I've made it too light or whatever. So I come back to my original Photoshop file and it's just where I left off. Even if I left off a month ago, all those adjustments are right where I left off. I don't have to undo or redo anything. And that ability to then go in and make some minor change that improves it gives me a tremendous amount of power to get things just right. And I'd like to believe that my images are characterized by kind of a technical perfection. In other words, it's rare that I've got an exposure problem or a window error or something like that. And all I can say is, believe me, they don't start out so perfect. They get perfect because I can go back to them over and over and over and keep making those minor adjustments to get them just right. Guys, we're kind of up on 25 minutes. Do you want me to just wrap it up or show anything more? How are we doing?
Are there
questions coming up, David?
I've got one other thing I could show. That I'll show it for 1 minute and then we'll go on to questions. Here was one other thing I wanted to show because it's of interest to this crowd. Here's a actual Civil War 3D that I got off the Library of Congress, US Library of Congress website. And I've already defined a layer mask, pair of layer masks that are, you know, rather should look somewhat familiar to most people here. And the nice thing about this is, again, now I can go in and do just what I said. I can go in if I decided, gee, that grouping of people is very interesting to me. I can go in, I can blow up on them. And now it's so easy for me to get them exactly where I want, to window them exactly the way I want. And the beauty again is that, you know, there's plenty of image past where I am here. You see, here's the whole image, but you don't see it because that layer mask just makes the bad thing go away. So it makes it very, very easy to do this kind of adjustment. And so I could save a template like this and then bring in a whole series of these images and have them done consistently. All right, shall we go to the Q&A period?
Sure. Rick, did you see it? Okay, someone's got their hand raised. There was a couple questions earlier.
Yeah.
In the, I know that John Hart has something good to say. Let's just call on Carlton Bright meanwhile. So Carlton, you can go ahead with a quick question.
Test 1, 2. This is great. I really appreciate it, David. The alignment, do you need any left, right, crosshairs, grid? Do you use a grid on this?
I often, generally, I should have said at the outset that when I bring in a separate left-right pair like this, or pretty much anything I work on, I've already auto-aligned it in Stereo Photomaker. That is the first thing I do right out of the camera. I auto-align everything. So even if I split them and save them as a pair, I already know they're vertically aligned properly. And if I draw down a line, they should be very, very good. Yeah, I get on that highlight on the right. But what I will often do, here's an image. It's a composite, and you see I got a line down the center that shows me the dividing between the left and the right. And that's something I'll do often is I'll drag in two alignment things that are exactly at the window. They're exactly the same distance from the edges, so that as I'm viewing something like this Elvis thing, I don't have it showing here on the left, but normally I'd have that showing. And as I'm setting the window, because these are all set up as cross-eye viewing, and I cross-eye view them in 3D as I'm working on them, that allows me to know I've brought something right up to the window or I haven't, because, you know, on a wider format image, things often aren't close enough to the edge to see, oh, that's coming through the window or not. So yeah, I very rarely drag a vertical one down, one of these down, because I already know everything's aligned perfectly. Other than sometimes if I've sized something and moved it around, I'll realize, whoops, It doesn't show the window, Ron, because I'm cross-eyeing a left-right. So if I put it here, it's only in one. It's not in both. I'm gonna have to
That
take that
Civil
to the
War
school.
photo that you did.
What's that?
That Civil War photo you showed?
Yes.
I would have aligned it with like a hat or something with the cross grid technique. That would be my technique.
Well,
I realized you did
actually,
that.
I'm looking at it now. It's not perfect. So that's exactly what I do here is maybe come in here and get that thing. Not
Okay,
but
good.
I may not have run auto align. I may have brought in the original pair right off the Library of Congress website, or actually I'm looking at it now. It looks like there's maybe a slight magnification error.
The fact that you can move them around individually is fantastic.
Well, yeah, sure.
And now
It's
you can
huge
actually realign it with the grid concept.
Yes.
Perfectly. So this is really a valuable breakthrough. So
Although again, I want to emphasize that if you want to avoid doing vertical aligns after the fact, if you've auto aligned in Stereo Photo Maker, everything should come in good vertically, and then all you ever have to do is left-right align for windowing.
Right, because I SPM everything.
Okay, so we have
Having said that, that doesn't mean I never do it. You know, sometimes like when I was editing the picture of the girl, and I suddenly realized, oh, I changed the scale on one and not the other. So sometimes I've gotten so involved changing one side that I forgotten to do the other one, and then I suddenly realized, whoops, I gotta somehow redo what I did, and a fiducial will give me a nice reality check that, okay, yes, I in fact did do it correctly.
Thank you.
I got a question from Gordon that says, is there a way to vertically lock two objects or layers with each other, or do you just move one of a pair and then vertically align each time?
Well, again, when you oh, I've made these bigger. That's why. Wondering why they're filling up more of the thing. Again, when you grab both of them simultaneously, now anything I do, they are locked. So as long as they started out aligned, they're going to stay aligned. And again, if I take her eye right up to the top, yeah, it does. It aligns perfectly. So as long as you remember to move things vertically in particular together. For horizontal, I don't do that because, again, I might want to window her. So I'm going to move her horizontally without moving the other. But I virtually never want to vertically misalign them in 3D. So as long as you just, I'm holding the control key down and clicking on multiple layers. So I've selected multiple layers and then they're locked again.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions? It seems like a lot of the questions in the chat were answered by other folks in the chat.
Oh, great. Ron, I heard you steam coming out of your ears figuratively. Did you have something you wanted to say to tell me that this whole thing is bunk and I shouldn't do it? What do you want to say?
So you need to raise your hand so that we can
Okay.
find you easily. And then if anybody else has a question, you can raise your hand in the participants window.
Jay Kuznets has his hand raised. Jay, do you have your microphone on?
You need to, but you need to do it in the participants window, and then we can easily get to you. So we'll go to Jay after that, just because Ron is already queued up.
There we go.
So I've unmuted Ron. Ron, you should be able to talk. Are you there?
Not unmuted. Am I unmuted now?
We hear you, Ron. Go for it.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, there's a million ways to do this, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And, everything, the information about layers is really important once you're dealing with the layers. But my approach is to do everything, the alignment and matching left and right if there is any discrepancy in exposure, because that's easily done pretty well automatically by SPM on on one of the adjustments that they have. But then everything I do when I bring it into Photoshop is they're next to each other on the same layer. So I don't have to bother with moving them both separately.
Well, that's because are you not probably doing images like this that are composites of multiple things, right?
Well, if I do composites of multiple things, I actually do it on will do it on two separate images instead of having it on one image. I'll just have the two images separate. That way I can copy and paste any.
Well, I noticed David Richardson doing that. I don't like that. Here is one of my composites. So it's three different things. It's a background plus the two signs. And so the lefts are all in a group. And you'll notice I've even color coded them red left and blue right, which I believe you will approve of. If you approve of nothing else, you approve of the color coding, right? And then here's all of my things. But again, the reason I like to do this is, if I decide, once I've got the curve right on something and I want to apply it, I get one right, and then boom, I just come over here and I drag it. And
you can drag from one image to another as well.
But I like to keep them. For me, it's easier to keep them all in one. And again, I cross-eye view everything. If you cross-eye view this, you'll see it's all set up. So that's purely preference. I noticed again David Richardson doing that last night. I like to keep it all. It's just like maybe it's because of my film background. When I switched from realist format to 2x2, so instead of having a single mount with both my images, I had two separate ones. I suddenly found that the left and the rights got separated a lot of times and I couldn't find them. So I like keeping the left and the rights together. That goes all the way back to stereo realist mounting. You never can lose or separate the left and the right when you're dealing with a realist mount. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing here. They're always both there. They're always aligned and I can see in an instant. And I don't have to do all that business with that Rob Ellis told us about a long time ago about how you can go to window and then somewhere in here is a thing about match zoom, match location, match rotation, all that stuff. That's a phenomenal tool, but I don't need it because I'm always keeping them in a single thing. But yeah, there's a lot of ways, a lot of things are personal preference, like what David Richardson showed yesterday about how he colorizes. I wouldn't do it exactly that way. I would make the entire image a color, and then I'd use a layer mask to apply it to a certain area. There's really no advantage over that, over the way he does it. It's just the way I like to work because I'm used to it.
Yeah.
All righty. Anybody else with the raised hand? I guess we should, maybe we can wrap it up soon.
Yeah, we're running a little long.
Eric doesn't need to be anywhere, right?
That's right. You guys have got nothing to do for the rest of the day.
Yeah, right. Except for stereo theater, 48 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to cut out now and start setting things up for the theater. So I'll see you there in 45 minutes.
Right.
Adios. Okay. So we can take maybe, if you have a question, go into participants and raise your hand and we can try to get one more.
Yeah, it's up to you, Dave. I could stay here till 2 when the thing starts, but I imagine you've got a few other things on your plate. So when you want to pull the plug on this.
Yeah, maybe we'll, yeah.
So.
All right, let's pull the plug. Thanks so much for your big round of applause.
Thank you.
Stuff, and you'll be around later on in Facebook or in the rooms if anybody has any follow-up questions. Yeah. Okay, great.
Thanks.
All right, thanks
Thank you
everyone.
very much, David.
Yep.
That was great.
Thank you.
See you in the stereo theater.